ladies and gentlemen. My name is Phyllis Italiano, and I am interviewing today a very prominent and important person in our district, and that is our representative to Congress, Timothy Bishop. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure to see you again and again.
It's always nice to see you as well.
I wanted to start a little bit with your background because I don't know that everybody knows how locally you are. You know, you really do have a tremendous background right here in our own Hampton area. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Okay, well, thank you. I'm a member of the 12th generation of my family, the Bishops, to live in the village of Southampton. The first group of bishops came to Southampton right after around 1643. They were among the second group of settlers to come to Southampton. And I grew up in the house that my father was born in, and I now live about 200 yards from that house. And that's on my father's side. On my mother's side, her grandparents came to Sagaponack in the late 1800s and had a 200-acre potato farm off of Hedges Lane in Sagaponack. And in fact, my grandmother came to Sagaponack to teach in the one-room schoolhouse in Sagaponack.
Oh, wow.
And that's how she met my grandfather. And so, on both sides of my family, I have pretty deep roots. And, my ancestors on my father's side were farmers and fishermen and whalers, and on my mother's side, they were farmers. And so the pieces of the heritage of Eastern Long Island that are so prominent, farming, fishing, so on, are part of my family's history as well. So, I've loved being able to live my whole life in Southampton. I've loved being able to raise my children in my hometown. I've loved being able to raise my children with the children of my best friends that I went to high school with and have been connected with in some cases since kindergarten. I just sort of like that continuity and that cohesiveness. I've obviously seen a lot of changes, but I think the East End remains a very special place where people really do care about one another and really do work to make our communities a better place or better places, even though that's not what you think of when you think of the Hamptons. When you think of the Hamptons, you think of the glitz and the glamour and the summer season and so on. But what the Hamptons really is to me is a collection of year-round people who work real hard and care about their families and care about their communities and care about one another.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more about many things. Number one, this is the most special place I have ever been and lived in my life. However, I do wish I had been you and had been born and raised here. Wow. You must have had a wonderful, wonderful childhood.
Oh, we did. I have 4 siblings, and 2 of them still live in Southampton. And we had a wonderful, I won't say idyllic existence, but we had a wonderful childhood. My mother and father were very focused on us, and my father worked for the New York Telephone Company, and he worked very hard. He worked 80, 90 hours a week, week in and week out, and he would literally go months at a time without a day off because he was working hard to provide for his kids. And one of his goals was to see to it that his 5 kids had an opportunity that he never had, which was to go to college. And he was able to put, 5 kids through. All of us went to private colleges, and he was able to do that on basically a blue-collar salary because he was willing to work as hard as he did. And once my older brother went off to college, so I was 16 when he went, my mother went back to work. She had, there were 5 of us, 4 still at home, and she went back to work. And so she worked very hard also, again, so that we could all have an opportunity. And, so I and my siblings remain, very grateful to my parents that they were willing to work as hard as they did, and to sacrifice as much as they did to give us the opportunities that we've each had. And, you know, I mean, but I've had things that, I mean, we used to work until my grandfather, the potato farmer, Francis Roselle, died when I was 14. But, you know, the summers that I was, I think, 11, 12, 13, 14, we worked on the potato farm. And I think some of the happiest moments of my life were being out on the fields of Sagaponack, literally at 6:30 in the morning, digging potatoes at age 13. I thought I was the luckiest kid alive. I mean, I loved every second of it. And so when I now see a potato field become houses, that's, you know, I mean, I know it's part of the evolution of East End, but it also is a little bit of what makes the East End special going away forever, you know. So one of the things that I've worked very hard on in Congress, and, you know, will continue to work hard on, is anything related to open space preservation. I think that that's an extremely important environmental imperative for us here. And that, for me anyway, is rooted in my childhood, is rooted in, you know, spending my summers on a potato farm.
You know, when I first started coming out here, I'm from the city, the Bronx, and my mother and father moved to Westchester County, and then for many years I went to Fire Island, and my sister came out here to the East End, and I followed her, and one of the things we loved was that open vistas. We would say, look at that beautiful, to see sky meet the land was like a phenomenon for us.
I can remember very clearly sitting on my grandparents' porch on Hedges Lane in Sagaponack and being able to see the ocean, because there was nothing between them and the ocean except potato fields. Now, that's obviously not the case any longer.
No, I don't.
But that
don't
was,
think so.
I mean, that was beautiful, just beautiful. And I remember when Sag Store, I mean, now it's, you know, it's a little trendy, and, you know, you drive by and there's Mercedes and BMWs and, you know, Audis in front of it. It used to be you'd drive by and the only thing that was in front of the Sag Store were pickups and tractors, you know, but you know, it's how the East End has changed.
Well, that is one of the things that I think we have to try to work on, which is we know we need the Mercedes, we know we need those people because they do support us.
Absolutely.
And our year-round community, of which I am one, but I think we also want to maintain some of our way of life as well.
And I think, as with everything else in life, it's finding the right balance. And, you know, I think we need to recognize that if you look at the principal industries of Eastern Long Island, it's travel and tourism, it's everything associated with the second home industry, and it is farming and fishing. And all of those, what they all have in common is the importance of maintaining environmental quality at the highest possible level, and whether that's, you know, protecting beaches and protecting clean air and protecting clean water and protecting open space, all of those things give us the economic vitality that we have. I mean, there's a false choice that is often made, and in fact, my Republican colleagues in the House of Representatives are making it right now, that if you are protective of the environment, that means you are anti-business or you are hurting the economy. And they're about to unveil a whole legislative agenda that will attempt to roll back years of environmental regulation under the heading of trying to stimulate business. Their theory is that we're throttling business by virtue of environmental regulations. I would say that for Eastern Long Island, the environment is the economy, and that the job creator out here is the environment. And so if we swing too far in the direction of loosening regulation, then we're going to hurt our economy, because we're going to take away the very things that make our economy so vibrant. Because, again, what makes our economy vibrant is the beauty of this area and what attracts people here. I mean, if we had, for example, if our shoreline was not protected or if our beaches were not fit for recreation or swimming, do you think people would still come out here? No. Do you think an oceanfront home could rent for $1 million for the summer? No. I mean, do you think that somebody would be willing to invest 10 or 15 or $20 million in building a second home? No. None of those things would happen if our environment isn't maintained at an appropriate level, and it's doing that gives, you know, the plumbers and the carpenters and the electricians and the tennis court installers and all of those people, which really is the lifeblood of our year-round economy. It gives them the work that they need to do to support their families.
Gosh, I love that. Our environment is what we are about.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is an interconnectedness between the environment and the economy. And as I say, the environment is the economy is the environment.
Right.
You know, I mean, they cannot be isolated. They are you know, inextricably linked, at least here. And by the way, we're not the only district in the country that's like this. I mean, there are districts all over the country that have the same fundamental type of reliance on a clean and well-preserved environment in order to be a prod to economic growth.
Yes, I know. I mean, we have issues right now. I mean, our shore, of course, is one of the ones. One of the things that we are very very aware is being, you know, little by little disappearing, and we have to do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole issue of shoreline protection is very important, and here's really one of the issues where I break with the Obama administration. I mean, they do not believe in something called beach nourishment, which is replenishing the sand on beaches periodically so that they maintain some degree of stability. They don't believe that that's, you know, that is a process that has merit. I would say that how our beaches survived the most recent storm points out just how valid the notion of beach nourishment is. I mean, perhaps the most fragile piece of shoreline that we have, at least in my congressional district, is Fire Island. And the Fire Island beaches, with one exception, came through this storm in a very stable way, and it's because of beach nourishment projects that were done, you know, in some cases a year ago, in some cases 6 months ago, 2 years ago, that protected the homes. And in protecting the homes, you're also protecting the infrastructure that lies behind those homes. So I think this storm that we just recently have come out of really underlines the importance of protecting our beaches, because in protecting our beaches, we're protecting property values, and as I say, we're protecting the infrastructure that lies beyond the beachfront homes. So that's something that I've worked very hard at. I've worked hard to bring the Army Corps of Engineers to the table.
And as a matter of fact, I having been and spent many, many years in Fire Island, 35, since the 1960s, where we worked on all of those kinds of things. And we always knew that Fire Island is very important because it really does protect Long Island.
It does, as does the Barrier Beach as you move further east. You know, the Meadow Lane area of Southampton. I mean, you protect the inner shore. I mean, if there was an overwash of the Barrier Beach, that would affect let's say Shinnecock Bay or Great South Bay or Quantuck Bay or Mauritius Bay, which in turn would affect the inner shore. And there's a lot of ecology that would be impacted if that were to change, and it would also really threaten infrastructure on the North Shore. So these are all things that we have to be very conscious of. And as I say, I think this last storm was a reminder of that.
Yes, yes. Well, this last storm was a reminder about a lot of things, like our power situation. As we speak, we're just coming out of this storm. I still don't have power.
Yeah, I know there's about 70,000, I think that's the number, of Long Islanders who still do not have power. And I mean, it's enormously troubling that you know, we're now, what, 5 days removed from the storm, 6 days removed from the storm. And I mean, I know I was without power for 3 days, and our neighborhood was our whole neighborhood was without power. What was so sort of tantalizing is, you know, friends of ours that live literally 2 blocks away, at most 1,000 yards away, never lost power. And, you know, so, that has turned out to be the story of this storm. The biggest problem has been down trees and down power lines. And I know that the people that are out working, the LIPA people and the crews that they brought in from all over the country, they're working very long days, and they're trying to, I mean, they started off with, I think, about 600,000 people out of power. They've got that down to 70,000. I think the biggest problem has been communication. I think not for homeowners to not know where they stand, to not know when someone might be coming to their neighborhood. That's been the biggest problem. And I think if the LIPA leadership is going to work on anything, and I think they have to work on the issue of how do they let their ratepayers know where they stand and when a crew is likely to be there and how long it's likely to take. And I think that's been a shortcoming that's been pretty graphically exposed in this storm.
Right. Yes, I absolutely agree that is the problem, because I actually left for a few days and came back thinking, well, I'm sure to get it by now, and you know, calling and driving around streets looking for LIPA trucks, you know, that were not there, and it's been very, very hard on us. But I wanted to also talk to you just a little bit about your own last election, and now you've got a whole new set of colleagues to work with. And how are you finding that?
Well, first off, I was very, you know, pleased to get reelected. It was a very tight election. My race was, I think, the most narrowly decided of every congressional race in the country. I won by 500 and I think it was 593 votes.
And the last.
And the last one. It wasn't called until the 8th of December. But it was a very tough year for Democratic incumbents, and the fact that I was able to withstand that, even though there was probably $5 or $6 million spent against me by my opponent and by some outside groups that got involved in the race. I mean, I was able to survive that, and you know, I'm pleased and, you know, honored that happened. And you know, I expect a tough race again in 2012, but we'll deal with that when the time comes. As far as what it's like now, this is my 9th year in the Congress. I have never seen the partisan antipathy or the lack of willingness to find common ground and find common solutions as pronounced as it is now. It is a very bad environment. And I've been trying to make sense of this intellectually, and the best that I can come up with is that there was a very angry electorate in the fall of 2010. As a consequence, across the country, we elected a lot of angry candidates, and those angry candidates are now angry legislators, and many of them came to the Congress believing that compromise is a 4-letter word. And that, to me, is both unfortunate, if not debilitating. I mean, we are a participatory democracy in a pluralistic society. We are a country that encourages freedom of speech. We are a country that encourages freedom of thought and freedom of expression. And all of that is a recipe for multiple points of view that are strongly held. And the only way you can govern in that environment is if there's a willing to compromise. If people stake out rigid ideological positions and refuse to move from them, then that's a recipe for paralysis. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. That's why, you know, we have this threatened government shutdown in April, and why we had the threatened government shutdown over the debt ceiling debate in late July and early August. And it's why we had a partial shutdown of the FAA, because there's been, up until the 11th hour, to the last possible minute, there's been a refusal to find common ground. And that's a disservice to the people we were elected to represent. None of us are going to get everything that we want. It's just not going to happen. That's the nature of the system that was designed by our founding fathers, and it's the nature of our country.
And it's the nature of life.
Indeed it is. And so unless, and look, we return to Washington in a week. I'm hopeful, although recent events have diminished that hope a great deal, I'm hopeful that we will return and there will be some willingness to move off rigidly held ideological positions and adopt some things. I mean, for example, I voted for the debt limit compromise. I didn't like the debt limit compromise at all. I voted for it because I thought the alternative, default, was unthinkable. Not only was it unthinkable in terms of the prestige of the United States, maintaining the full faith and credit of the United States, it also would have had a devastating impact on our economy, and to have really ideological rigidity result in an enormous amount of human suffering just struck me as outrageously irresponsible. So I was willing to sign on to something that I really had a very hard time with, yes, so as to avoid the very negative consequences. A lot of my colleagues weren't. A lot of my colleagues, you hear Michelle Bachmann say that, we shouldn't have raised the debt limit, that we should have, we should have not borrowed any more money. I mean, that's, in my opinion, irresponsible. It's just flat out irresponsible. But it's that kind of thinking, replicated over and over and over again, that brings you to the kind of crisis points that we've been at already now. I mean, Republicans that have been in charge of the House of Representatives for 8 months. Already we've had 3 different sort of self-created crises that could have easily been avoided.
Wow. Well, we have very similar things going on here, too, in our own local East Hampton politics, where we have crises that are threatening, things like our comprehensive plan, our waterfront revitalization, things that took years and were designed by both parties over the time, and now we see that there's this movement away from those very, very important held beliefs and plans that we have to safeguard our area, and we're really having a difficult time with that.
I mean, I really think there's, and look, I haven't followed the issue, so I can't comment on it specifically, but I will say that I think there are some things that we ought to be able to deal with without the normal kind of partisan, posturing that we deal with. And for me, one of them is the environment. I mean, I think we all ought to be environmentalists. We all ought to recognize what our obligations are, and in terms of passing on a world at least as good as the one we inherited to our children. Right. And as I was saying a few moments ago, recognizing the economic implications, for us anyway, of an environment that isn't at a level that we need it to be, or isn't maintained at a level that we need it to be. So I would hope that those are things that reasonable people, irrespective of their political orientation, would be able to come together on and say, okay, this is the right thing to do. Let's remember, nationally, it was Richard Nixon who signed into law the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, I will guarantee you that there is not a single, with the possible exception of Huntsman, not a single Republican candidate for president that would endorse the Environmental Protection Agency right now. And yet it was Richard Nixon who presided over the first Earth Day, who, the Environmental Protection Agency has become, the favorite whipping boy of at least the Republican leadership in the House and of the presidential candidates, and it's misplaced. It's misplaced. That's not to say everything they do is right or perfect, but it is to say that we've worked hard at things like protecting clean air and clean water We've passed landmark legislation in our history that allows that to happen. I mean, before the Clean Water Act was passed, 70% of the waters of the United States were either undrinkable or unfishable.
Wow.
Now it's only 40%. Okay? So we've made dramatic strides, and yet there is a concerted effort now to strip the EPA of its ability to enforce the requirements of the Clean Water Act. That's a step, a dramatic step in the wrong direction. I very much hope we can fight it off, but I mean, under the heading of unshackling business so that it can grow, people want to, as I say, strip the Environmental Protection Agency of many of its enforcement and oversight responsibilities. You do that here in this district, and you will shackle the environment. You will not unshackle it. You will shackle it.
Well, I think I have a supervisor that you need to talk to, because that's what seems to be his plan of action. As you would say, he is confusing the importance of our environment and the growth of business. Doesn't understand that they go together. So that's something that we have to continue to help him to understand. Anyway, I thank you very much for coming. We certainly didn't get to all the issues we wanted to talk about, but
well, thank you for having me on.
It was my pleasure, I can assure you.
Thank you.
We will hopefully see you more prominently in the next election coming up.
Well, you know, my election's not till 2012, but I mean, we have an election coming up in 2011. A lot of important local races.
Right.
But yes, you will certainly see me in 2012.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you.